Okay, good morning, beautiful artist. Happy Friday. Just get this around here so I can check on the sound. Make sure we're working properly. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Okay, sound is working. I can get some. So I'm starting this painting today just a few minutes early because I have a meeting at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I have just under an hour to work on this painting with all of you today, which I'm going to do on an 8x10 panel, ampersand gesso board. Reminder, if you're just tuning in, watching this on replay, I've got the link for you to make sure that you're on the email list for a chance to win the DVD today. One member of my subscriber list will win a free copy of this every single week. That's valued at $75. Go to Art Life with Kelly, spelled with an I.com to get on the list. Let me know who's here, who's tuning in, please. Good morning, Tamra. And one of the next winner is going to be pulled today, just so you know. So if you don't know if you get emails from me, go to your inbox and see if you get any emails from Kelly Folsom. Maybe just search your inbox. Kelly Folsom Art Life School, not my collector list, which is kellyfolsom.com. You want to make sure that you're on the artist and art student list in order to qualify for a chance to win the DVD. All right, so let's dive in and get started on this painting today. Let me get set up. I'm going to turn the camera around for those of you who want to paint from the setup or want to paint along, either now or later on. And you can take a screenshot of this. This is about the eye level that I will be at during the demo. Good morning, Mary Oakley. Good morning, Adriana. Good morning, Tamara. Okay, beautiful. And just so you know, these will be up and available for replay right here on my Facebook page. Make sure that you like my Facebook page if you don't want to miss, didn't mean to move that just yet. If you don't want to miss next week's demonstrations. So today is the countdown for 6 of these free demos here on my Facebook page. And they'll be available on the Facebook page through the end of February, or 1st of March, rather. And then Art Life School members, these will be available permanently in your video library. So take a screenshot of this setup, please, if you want to paint from it. If you think you have any interest at all in painting from this, go ahead and get a screenshot. As for these lives, I'm not posting photos, so that's the way that you're going to get the reference image. Good morning, Kathy Kepler. Good morning, Marion. All right. And, something that was on my mind this morning, question I have for you is, when was the last time you had fun at your easel? Are you having enough fun? Are you having enough joy and bliss at your easel whenever you go to paint? Maybe just remember the last time that you can recall really enjoying yourself. And if it's been a while, that's okay. You may even want to journal about that at some point. And if one comes to mind, let me know in the comments below. Last time I really enjoyed myself at my easel or at your sketchbook. Any kind of creative process is good. So sometimes we just start to allow other things in to our mind, and perhaps start to lose some of our joy and bliss when it comes to creating. So another journal question for you on this note is, what contributed to me feeling so much joy during that painting or during that sketch or whatever the case is? Bring up one specific time that you can recall. Either maybe it's been a long time ago, maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was today already. But genuinely you felt at peace, joy in the creation process. So recall that specific instance, and then think about what contributed to that. What state of mind was I in? What kind of mood was I in? What were the states of being I was feeling? You're just having a really good day. Maybe you were already in a good mood. Maybe you got super excited about the subject that you were going to create. But more specifically, I think, is looking also at what were your states of mind or states of being. Were you able to just play and have fun and not be so maybe stressed out or hung up on how the painting is going to turn out? We have this beautiful, free, creative spirit as children, where we don't judge things so harshly, and we maybe don't make things too hard. And before we start getting graded and assessed and judged and all the stuff, and then we learn how to do that to ourselves. There's a time, in our development where we just really feel that genuine joy and bliss and in the creative process. And it's not necessarily about the specific thing that we're creating. It's just about being present and enjoying the moment. So journal about that, and then maybe journal about the opposite of that would be, when was the last time you showed up to the easel and you just felt massive resistance, or frustration or anxiety or stress or pressure? Good morning. Maybe pull up one of those specific instances to your mind where you felt that way during the painting process, and journal about that. What was going on for you during that painting? What were you thinking? Were you worried about how the painting was going to turn out? Were you frustrated that things weren't going your way, perhaps, in the painting? What kind of self-talk was going on with you during that painting? What states of being were you in that during that painting where you had a really hard time? Were you being really harsh and critical on yourself? Were you, engaging in negative self-talk? Maybe you were pulling up criticisms that you received from somebody about your last painting, or maybe somebody left a negative comment on one of your posts, or maybe people didn't leave any comments on your posts for your paintings, and you go to the easel thinking about that and thinking about, oh, I don't think anybody cares, this doesn't matter. So just, that's another good thing to journal about, and then compare and contrast the two. The time when you felt really free and, just kind of in the present moment painting, maybe even joyful and blissful during that painting process. Compare and contrast those two experiences, because really everything that we are thinking and feeling and our state of mind and state of being shows up on the canvas. And in that way, and it also colors our experience, right? And in that way is the cliche phrase that every painting is a self-portrait of the artist. Now, the thing about all of this is, the important part about all of this is that, whatever state of mind you're in, more often, let's say more often than not, you're in not the blissful state. Maybe you're in the anxiety state whenever you go to create. Either way, whichever state you're in more often than not, it will tend to snowball on itself, right? So it'll tend to spiral and you will start repeating that state of being. So if you've been in a stressful state or anxiety state at the easel, how can you reconnect to those times that you have felt, bliss creating and freedom and joy and just kind of a sense of playful wonder and fun? How can you begin to reconnect to that state of being in your next painting? How can you tap back into that? Because that will also spiral on itself, and tend to grow. Just food for thought today. All of us can fluctuate from one state to the next. And maybe one day we're feeling great, but maybe another day we struggle with a painting or just whatever happens and we get knocked off of our game, so to speak. So it's important to know how to course correct, how to bring yourself back to that state of bliss. And I think we all know how to do it because we all knew how to do it as children. Think about whenever you were a little kid, a little girl, a little kid, how easy it was for you to just play and enjoy and create. And maybe it was coloring. I was thinking about this morning, how I used to love just, playing with my spirograph and just watching the ink, make these really cool designs. And I wasn't doing it to impress anybody. I wasn't even doing it really to necessarily learn back then. I was just having fun. I was just enjoying this blissful, beautiful thing happening before my eyes. So I think it really comes back to tapping into those states of being whenever we are struggling with our practice, our art practice. So reconnecting back to that detachment that we had as children in our creative process and seeing if we can just kind of get back into the present moment. This morning I was having memories even of, as I was journaling about all of this, making little puppets out of construction paper. And just how much I just got lost in that process and just really enjoyed, the touch of the paper and the color of the paper and feeling the glue on the end of my fingertips, and just how much fun it was just to create something. So that is really the key. So if you have been struggling, that's what I would recommend for those of you who maybe are finding yourself in that place of, I've lost my joy of creating. I've lost my bliss with creating. And all I feel now is I feel mostly resistance, maybe not all that you feel, but, maybe you're just really struggling with, feeling all that pressure and resistance, and you've kind of sucked the joy out of your practice for yourself. And I think it's important to recognize that too, that all of the stress is really, you've created it for yourself. It's not anybody's fault. It's not, even if somebody did criticize you, or criticize your painting rather, it's not their fault. We choose to let that in. We choose to take that on. And so a lot of times we might just enjoy playing the victim and blaming and shaming either ourselves or other people, but really it's all self-created. So we have to take responsibility for that, for our own, art practice. All right. Okay, love it. Kathy says, I was experimenting with a light, soft atmospheric technique, and it was really fun to think differently and concentrate on the process and not be concerned with the outcome. Yes, exactly, Kathy. So curiosity, exploration, right? These are the antidotes to and think about that. Like when we are genuinely curious, when we're genuinely exploring, we don't really have a lot of attachment. We're just kind of attachment. We're kind of really just curious, like, hey, let's see what happens. What could happen here? All right. So, I hope that's helpful to somebody. I know you can watch any of these videos to understand what the heck I'm doing here with the start of this process. But I really did want to, just share that and pose those questions for you today, because 9 times out of 10, it's not so much our skill level, where we're at. It's, that's really a lot of the reality of being an artist, the things that we deal with. And, what I see block people the most is that side of things, the mindset side. Okay, I'm going to do kind of a violet tone shadow background back here. I think it's going to pair really nicely with the pinks that are in the lilies. So I'm mixing some white, some black, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and burnt umber to get kind of a neutral, kind of a violet brown. And if you're wondering what brush I'm using today, this is by Silver Brush. This is really good, especially, this is for oil and acrylic, but especially if you are a water-based painter, this might be the better option for you, rather than the Silver Grand Prix, because this is a synthetic brush and it is such a beautiful, beautiful quality. All right, once I get in some of this background color, then I can start to wipe away some of my lights on these beautiful, joyful chrysanthemums. Part of what got me thinking about joy is that in the creative process is that whenever I saw these bright kind of lemon yellow chrysanthemums in the grocery store, I literally kind of gasped, like, oh, those are gorgeous. That color is so happy, so sometimes it's just a matter of paying attention to things like that, being in that present moment, being curious, and paying attention and noticing when those sorts of inspiration things hit you, right? Because sometimes we can also ignore those. I don't have time. It's not practical. I gotta I gotta do all this stuff today. I don't have time. If I buy those flowers, I might not be able to paint them because I got all these other things to do. And it's like, well, okay, well now we're just ensuring that we won't paint them. And I think every time that we kind of shut down that creative urge, the point would be, even if you don't get a chance to paint those flowers, you followed through with the creative impulse, the inspiration impulse to buy them, to give that as a gift to yourself. All right. So, I'm just going for a lighter version on the side. There's more white in the mix. Same colors, really just white is in the mixture, because the background is moving from dark to light on the left side to the right side. Let's see, I'm going to check in and see if anybody else has kind of shared anything. And if you struggle with brushwork, controlling brushwork, these brushes also will be easier to handle, easier to deal with. So they might be a better starting point for you to get you started in handling your brush handling skills, than maybe the Silver Grand Prix. So, if you've tried those Silver Grand Prix, the ones that I really love the most, and you just, can't seem to get a grip on them and it's keeping you from painting, try this brush instead. It's such a high quality brush too. So you're not sacrificing quality at all. It's just a different kind of bristle that you're painting with. It's a little bit softer. Okay, Candy says, challenging myself and enjoying the journey, refreshing. Loved learning, trying something new, and not worried about the outcome. That was spring. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, thinking about things like that, like what kind of led to that, freedom and that curiosity. And then how can we, make sure that we're doing that enough, or maybe the next time if we get caught up in attachment or whatever, how can we bring ourselves back to that excitement and trying something new and just being curious and playful and open and having the courage to do that, really. Okay, so now that I have enough of the background in, I'm going to start with the yellow of the flowers. And the brush was Silver Bristlon. It's a filbert. This is a number 6. Silver brush Bristlon. It's a blue handle brush. And if y'all miss anything, since I have less time today, you can always, watch this on replay once it's complete and rewind as you go, since I won't be able to catch every time. And repeat every time today since I have a little less time. So I'm going to start with some yellow ochre and cad lemon just to get, the center of my chrysanthemum started. If you're just getting started painting flowers, I do highly recommend trying chrysanthemums first before you maybe dive into roses. They do last a lot longer than roses. Tulips will fade fast, so chrysanthemums are a good one to start with. I'm going to use a little bit of that background color in with this and a little bit of my Naples yellow to just kind of gray the color a bit where I'm seeing some shadow tones on the tips, where it's not like a pure vibrant yellow. Okay, underneath where we have some cast shadows. And try to keep your chrysanthemum massed a little bit tighter together. Be careful having too many really pokey petals. I was like, it's not leaves. Yeah, pokey petals that are sticking out like little spider legs, so even if it does kind of look like that in real life, I've noticed that in paintings, these flowers look a lot better when their petals are a little more held together, not too separated. So you can have a few separate ones, but be mindful not to have, all these different pokey petals sticking out, grabbing attention. So for this color, there's more white in the mix, more cad lemon and white, but definitely just more white in the mix right here on the side plane of this mum, because that's getting more light right there. And then these chrysanthemums are like little bowls, okay? So the inside down in here goes into shadow, and then you'll get another little petal poking up on the back side, especially on the back right side, catching some light. Keep that background color handy, or even just some burnt umber will work. But for these kind of petals here that are in shadow, they're not super dark in value, but you want to neutralize, you want to darken the color a little bit and neutralize the chroma of that color. Now on these, against the background, I like to start the stroke against the background and then pull in. And then I need to go back to kind of that deeper yellow because you have shadow on the inside. I already have background color in there, so that's going to work really nicely to get that started. So I'm going to start with some burnt umber, some yellow ochre, and some cad lemon again, just to get like a nice, rich, warm but not too saturated in chroma shadow color. Now I'll need to come back in and overlay some petals on top here as well. And I'm using a number 2 right now. Then for the smaller petals, I'll probably switch down to a 0 since I'm working on such a small little painting here. Well, 8 by 10. So if you're struggling to finish your paintings or to paint wet into wet and finish them wet into wet, if that's something that you're interested in learning and doing, I would recommend, painting smaller until you can really build up that skill set, and then you can begin to, build up your skills of wet into wet, or even just finishing a painting in a shorter amount of time by going smaller, and then you can size up, once you build that skill set. Okay, I'm going to bring in a little bit of black here because on these chrysanthemums, there's a little bit of green. And I'll get more green on my palette with actually, I'll go ahead and do that now. Get more green on my palette with the green jug. So I'll start with some phthalo blue. I'm going to add in some of that yellow ochre. It's going to give me a pretty nice, pretty green here. I'm just going to mass in the whole shape other than the shadow shape that's on the right-hand side. I need more of that color. So this is taking up a large amount of room on the canvas. And I think it's nice to do it this way because once you figure out the color that you want on the jug, then you have that color on your palette. If you're seeing any bits of green in the flowers or maybe even in the cloth, like some faint touches of green, you already have that color mixed up on your palette. Okay, and then when you come in around this flower, try to carve out some of those petals whenever you're putting in some of that color. Okay, and that's just the kind of the base local color. This is a nice way to start if you are struggling with color mixing. And then where the highlight is, we definitely want to figure out where that is. If I have what I call a focal color in the painting, in this case, which is this yellow, I like to sometimes put a little flavor of that color into the highlight. Keep that color moving through the picture. Now, we want to create more form around this highlight. We want to bring out a little more light on the top plane. So I'm going to add a little more white, or maybe even a Naples yellow might be the best route to go. If that washes out too much of your green color, you can add back in some yellow, like a little cadmium lemon or a little more blue, because this is titanium white today. And as you can see, titanium white, although it gets you to the value very, very quickly, it takes less time to build up versus the flake white. It also really kind of washes out the color quite fast. So your colors can get really, really chalky if you're using a titanium white and you're overusing the white. Okay, so just be mindful of that if you're using titanium. Okay, and then I'm going to leave some of these brush strokes here because that kind of intimates some of the texture of this particular piece of pottery. And sometimes I would rather redo the highlight than try to work around, and save that little piece of highlight. You want the highlight to make sure the highlight really sits on top of the paint that's underneath, especially if it's kind of a shinier object. You don't want to overblend your highlight. All right, you're so welcome, Dobsy and Gary. I'm glad that these details are helping you. Awesome. Love it. That's, what I love is trying to simplify and demystify the painting process for people. because it can be quite like, what? Overwhelming. All right, so one thing we talked about earlier this week was shadow colors. If you missed that demo, it was the one with the green glass. Go back and watch that if you want to really have a simple starting process for shadow colors. But basically think of it as like a darker version. The easiest way to think of it is a darker version of your local color. Yes, there is more complexity to shadows than that, but especially if you are a total beginner or you're really struggling to understand shadow color, just start with a darker version of the local color and no white. Okay. So I'm starting with black, the same colors I used to make the local color, which was yellow ochre and a little bit of the phthalo blue. Okay, but something to darken, it would either be like a burnt umber or an ivory black. Yes, you can use paint with black. So much nonsense out there. It's like, it's a paint. You can paint with it. But much like titanium white, you just have to be mindful of the colors that you're using. So, titanium white also has its challenges where it kills colors just like ivory black. But you don't hear a bunch of silly people going, "No, use titanium white." Sorry, I shouldn't make fun, but it's just fascinating to me that that something like that piece of information just took off and has been unstoppable ever since. So it doesn't make any sense because all of these great, brilliant artists throughout the centuries have painted with ivory black. And our ivory black isn't even the real ivory black anymore. Thank goodness, because obviously they were, killing elephants and, making it out of real, ivory. So thankfully we don't do that anymore. Okay, so just getting in my handle shape here, one brushstroke at a time. And then going back to this lighter green, kind of the middle tone green, I would say for light on the handle. And then that kind of disappears, into shadow. And then there's a little bit of highlight here on the handle as well. I want to start that maybe a little further away from the petal that I have down here. I don't really want those 2 points to touch and get like a weird tangent there. All right. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to start back up here at the center of my star of the show flower, which is in the center. And I did kind of bend that down. And I'm going to go through and hit some of the highlight points or the more lit up petals with some titanium white and lemon yellow. And hopefully you're going to be able to see how we can push the contrast on this one object. So you want to push contrast throughout your whole painting, but also on each individual object. So we want to look for, what's the value of the local color? What's get some value contrast in the shadow, and then also where is kind of the highlight zone, or even if there's not like an actual highlight, there's always a part of the form that's getting hit with more light, okay, like this. And so that way too, you're really stretching the contrast on each individual object. Okay, so I'm just starting at the tip. And the one thing about these, and then pulling in, you want sharp edges on the outside, soft edges on the inside. Now, the petals that are bending back, the tips of those are getting a little bit of light, but then the main structure here is such that the right-hand side of these petals are getting more light, and then the interior is more concave. Okay, so you have to kind of keep that in mind, and make sure you get enough overlap in front of the jar. So again, it's better to start the stroke at the end of the petal and lift up into the interior so that you get a nice crisp overlapping edge in front of the object. Same thing here. You want a nice crisp overlapping edge in front of the shadow, the inside shadow plane of this chrysanthemum here. So you can start the stroke at the end of the form and lift in. Okay, and you can also make some of these edges a little bit stronger as you go. Got that green on my palette, so I'm going to mix in some green with some of this darker yellow I had for the center. Any of these flowers that are directly facing you, make sure you pull out, push some depth in the center. Some flowers are deeper than others. This one's kind of got a nice depth to it, so it needs enough kind of darkness in the center. And this one's more facing us more frontally, and then these are more at 3/4, you know, kind of turned at 3/4. But now that I have some of that green on my palette, I can play around with getting some green into, touches of green into these chrysanthemums that I didn't have before. That's just going to help kind of tie in with the color harmony. We'll have little pinpricks of light, you know, on edges of these petals here. Around that left side, just little tips of light, pinpricks of light. You've got to, you know, make sure that they don't start to overtake the whole flower. It's just a little bit, little edges of light. And getting in that kind of spiraling, circling, layering that's happening. If your green's maybe getting a little too green, just reach for a touch of burnt umber. It's just going to take it a little bit deeper, a little bit richer. Mix that in with your green. And again, if you're in doubt of, you know, how do I kind of get that more gray color, start with the yellow, which, you know, I made from yellow ochre and some cad lemon, and then add in some of that background color. Or if you run out of background color on your palette, just again grab some burnt umber, and that will work too, because that's the main color that's in the background. And that purple that's in the burnt umber is going to cancel out the yellow, right? Because purple and yellow are opposites. All right, going over to the lily, I'm just going to start with some alizarin crimson and white. And again, I'm going to pull in a little bit of burnt umber just to make that pink a little bit richer in color. Soft on the inside, softer edges on the inside, sharper edges on the outside. You do need a little bit of white, obviously, to get the value to contrast against the background. Try to make sure that you're just paying attention to the contour against the background, as if you could cut out that contour with a pair of scissors, like in one piece of construction paper. Pretend that you're doing that. Pretend you're following along the contour. You're not thinking petals, you're just thinking shape against the background. What is the joined shape without breaking it up into different petals yet? Okay, to get that started. And then these tips here go more white in local color, and they also just get more light on them, but there is a pattern of kind of a white bit on these, on this lily. This one is especially strong and white, so I'm going to pull in more white there, and there's also a bit of a highlight there as well. Now to create, I'm going to wipe out that white in my brush, especially since it's titanium white. To create a little more form and depth here, I'm going to bring in a bit more dark in the center with some burnt umber, ivory black, and that alizarin crimson. Very similar to background color, maybe just a little more pink. And that needs a little more alizarin crimson. But where we have, some of the depth in this lily, where it's going more concave, or you have like a fold in the petal, you want to bring in some of that darker color there. Or you're seeing the shadow side, for example, here, the shadow side of the lily here, the underplane, the underneath, can definitely you want to go a bit darker there. Get that form in. And if you don't get your edges the way that you want on this lily, mix back up again some background color, which was the ivory black, alizarin crimson, burnt umber, and a bit of white, and come in and just carve out some of these edges sharper, okay? So it's very natural painting wet into wet that some of your edges don't really get the overlap that you want, or some of the paint kind of flattens each other out a bit. You lose maybe some clarity. So that's where, I'm a big fan of coming back in and kind of carving out some of your shapes. And this also can help you modify your drawing. Of course, like if something needs to get a little more curved, like here, super easy to do that with your background color. Or for example, here, this needs a little more clarity and cleaning up of that edge. You can also decide, I can also, decide like, I want to pull a little more light in the background around this dark cast shadow that's on top of the picture from the lily. Okay, so you can start to really look at all these kind of lost and found edges. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Lynn. Good morning, Trish. Welcome, welcome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get more of the yellow in the background back here. Okay, I'm going back to the start of my shadow yellow, which is the yellow ochre and some lemon yellow. There's so much, kind of glow and light passing through these petals. Whenever you're sitting on the shadow side of something that's translucent like petals, you're going to see a lot of glow passing through them. It's best to paint the color, I think, first, kind of the local color first, and then paint the glow passing through. If you're going to do some of that glow. I'm just kind of carrying down some of this yellow here for now. And then, of course, we have some green leaves. So I still have some greens on my palette. I'm going to start off a little bit darker green. And if that phthalo is making too Christmassy of a green, again, you can add a little bit of burnt umber, or you can add some ivory black to your green mixture, and that'll kind of, tame that phthalo blue a little bit, make it a little less saturated. I'm just kind of going through and finding these little peekaboos of areas of contrast where, I'm not painting in specific leaves necessarily or stems, except for that one that's overlapping. But I'm just kind of using the dark of the green to further get more depth on my flowers that are in front. And where I do see maybe a specific green leaf, I will start to get those shapes in. There's a really strong one here. And again, I would say look at the front center of the form for the whole bouquet is what I mean by form. For the leaves are like the back of these little, the little green bits on the flowers on the back side. concentrate first on the front and center of the bouquet. You don't have to put all of these in, but I would concentrate first on front and center. You don't ever want the greenery to take away from the flowers. All right, now that I see that, I want to get a little bit more. This yellow started back here, and maybe these, well, I've got the lilies that are going to come up, like the lily bud is going to come up the tallest about there. So I think I'm good on the height of those back chrysanthemums. Sometimes your colors can get kind of spread out and all your paint kind of gets thin and spread out. So I like to come back in and scrape it up with a palette knife, using some of that background color with my yellow to come in and get some of these kind of grayed tones that are happening in here. Sometimes you can also just paint that, straight wet into wet. You don't even have to mix on the palette. You can mix on the canvas. It's a good idea to paint whatever's behind first and then paint the things that are on top. So that's why I'm not painting in the lilies first, and so that I don't have to come back in and paint around too much on those lilies. Usually I still have to do a little bit, but all right. And then these are turned back and away from the light source. So we're hardly seeing any of that really white mixture. But we do get a little bit, and that's going to be on the it's almost like they're backlit at this point, on the very back tips. Okay. Sometimes you might get a petal or two that's folded down, catching some light. But I'm going to try to get that kind of backlight effect. I'm trying not to put too much paint in this area because I know I'm going to have that overlap of the bud, the lily bud here in a moment. And sometimes I like to see, okay, there's a little piece of light on that petal there. So doing a few of these flowers more in full detail, goes a long way. You don't have to do every flower in your whole setup in full detail. Whew, that's a relief, while I have that lighter color on my brush and I've got the right size brush on hand, I'm going to come back in and make sure I get enough detail on this little flower, because this one is right in front of the picture, and also some of that green that's in the center and on the side plane here, because this one is turned at a 2/3 or 3/4 view facing the light. So you're going to have more of those darks on this side of the flower and more of the greens. It's a good idea to make sure that you are positioning your flowers at different angles so that you do get more depth. Now I'm just trying to put in some extra layers of brushstrokes that look like layers of petals here. That's more the true local color of the yellow ochre and cadmium lemon. But really it's the power of these layered brushstrokes that create some of the illusion of the depth and dimension on those flowers. Some of this won't quite make sense yet until I get the background cloth that's behind it painted, things like that. Go ahead and put in this little bud here. These little baby things, like the little bud, the little cherries, those are things that, if you had to let go of something, you can let go of those. and still call the painting complete. So it's why I don't maybe put them in right away. I value finishing paintings rather than like, oh, I didn't paint every little thing in there, so I can't finish this painting. No, don't do that to yourself. That is sabotage. You're sabotaging yourself through perfectionism or whatever you're doing when you do that. So be a finisher. And even if that means sometimes with the time you have to paint, you can't finish everything, it's fine. Start with the most important things first. I'm just going to soften this edge right quick to shadow. Start with the most important things first and then build from there. Save the kind of little cherry on top, literally, of the ice cream sundae for, last, because that all of this is the main point of the painting. You can do away with some of those little flourishes, those little, little touches. You cannot do away with this center flower. If you don't have the main bulk of the bouquet, you have nothing. Okay, but also don't throw the baby out with bathwater if you run out of time. It would be my advice to consider. Because that, again, is just self-sabotage. It really sabotages your confidence, whenever you do things like that. When you have a stack of unfinished paintings. And we have a hashtag, done is better than perfect inside the Art Life School that we use a lot, Okay. Good morning. Oh, Debbie Nelson, sending you so much love. Prayers for recovery. I hope you're doing okay. I'm glad to hear you came out of surgery successfully. I'd rather not do away with the white cloth if I can, because it's bringing in a lot of light and it's also bringing in some more depth. I'm just using titanium white right now because I know personally that I'm running out of time for the demo. So I just want to get you started on the right track for mixing up that white on the cloth. I'm just using straight up titanium for the lit side. And then for shadow side, I'm going to use some ivory black and Naples yellow light. And if you just tuned in, you can watch all of this on replay as soon as this demo finishes. And you can use a little bit of medium in here. Also, yellow ochre is nice to use in shadow whites. You can go thinner in your shadows. So hence a little more medium. And just kind of, you can even leave some of that tone like I'm doing underneath, some of the warmth of the tone. So you don't have to overpaint everything, right? Like you don't have to spell everything out all the time. You can leave a lot of things suggested depending on, your personal taste, I guess I would say, your style or taste. So same color mixture back here is maybe more yellow ochre to go a little bit darker, since that's more in cast shadow. And then since I know I'm running out of time, I definitely want to make sure I get up here and get in the overlap. I kept going back and forth on this one that's kind of half open. Should I cut it off? I cut quite a bit, quite a few things off. I'm going to start with the bud, kind of a lighter, brighter green, and that is coming up against the background right about here. I'm going to start with that lit edge, and then you're going to go to more of a shadow color. Again, nice trick is if you have that middle tone green, add a little bit of burnt umber, and you're pretty darn close on your shadow color if you do that. You also don't have to agonize over color mixtures, did I exactly match that color mixture? So on and so forth. One of my favorite floral artists is Franz Mortelmans, and it was always interesting to me how sometimes he would just kind of silhouette a whole flower, really, how he could really simplify things. I'm going to pull a little more yellow, a little more light. As I'm doing that, I'm just ever so gently, kind of softening the edge of light into the edge of shadow. And to get some of that glow I was talking about earlier, light passing through some of these petals, I'm just going to go a little bit lighter, especially on the right-hand side with a little more yellow ochre and cad lemon to get that effect of, glowing light passing through the petals. Okay. And of course, really to make this look more like a lily, we have to have at least a couple of these stamens, right? Is that what they're called? I think. And they're kind of more in an orange color. I like to start them first where they're more clear against the background. And I think less is more here, doing a few rather than 20 of them, especially the smaller the painting. You don't maybe really want to do every single one. And then a darker version of that for the ones that are showing up as like dark against light on the inside. So more alizarin crimson is in that color. But that'll start to kind of turn that more into an actual looking more like a lily. So first you get the shape. And, I find lilies to be pretty hard, actually. They've gotten easier over time for me to paint more simply, but I think sometimes it's a matter of, how you angle them in your setup. Set yourself up for an easier capture of them is what I would say. A little more light there. And maybe I have time just to do a little cherry color, and then I'll definitely have to fill in the blanks, so to speak, on the rest of this later on today, but after my meeting, since I have a meeting. So I'm doing some ivory black and alizarin crimson. You could also put in a little phthalo blue if you want, just to tie in the blues, since I've used phthalo blue elsewhere, but that umber color that I started with is nowhere near dark and rich enough. And unlike grapes, these cherries, light doesn't pass through them. So I'm going to take that color, add some white to it, maybe more phthalo for where the highlight is. You do still have a strong highlight. I'm just starting a little bit of kind of a purpley color around the highlight. And then since I have that kind of red-orange color I mixed up from the stamen earlier, stamen on the lily, I'll use that, to start the little stem. And then also this kind of lighter, just need a little pinprick of that on the edge of my brush for the light on the top of that stem. If you want to, you can pull a little more red in here or a little more pink. If you want to pull I would just be careful pulling too much light on these cherries because their main function, like that's too much light. So if you do get too much light, just kind of glaze back in some alizarin crimson over top. Their main function is to function as a nice, rich, purpley dark, and a smaller shape. Okay, everybody, I hope that this has been helpful to you today. Take some time also, especially if you're finding yourself struggling in your painting practice, to contemplate and journal some of those questions I asked in the beginning. I think it'll really help reignite your joy and your desire for creating. Okay. TTYL, ta-ta for now, as Tigger would say on Winnie the Pooh. Was that Tigger that would say that? That was a weird thought that came through. Thank you so much, Lana. Thank you, Gail Knowles. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And I'll just finish up kind of the tabletop a little bit later on today. Looks like tabletop, kind of maybe smoothing out the background just a pinch here and there. Yeah, and I think that probably should do it. And so thank you so much for being here. Wishing you all happy painting. I hope you have a phenomenal weekend. Debbie Nelson, I hope you're feeling better soon, and anybody else who is struggling right now, hope you are all feeling better soon. Art Life School members, I hope you enjoyed your new lesson that came out today. Woohoo! Super excited for that. And I will see you on Monday back here on my Facebook page at 10 a.m. Much love. Bye for now.